You may follow very slowly. Yoshe b'setirelion, b'tzel shadayit lonan, Omar ladoni machsi u'mitzudati, Elohai eftach bo, ki yotzucha mipach yakush, midever havot, bevrato yasech lach, v'taka knafav techse, tzina v'sochera mito. Lo tira mipachad laila, mechetz ya'uf yoma, midever ba'ofel yahaloch. Miketev yashuv tzaharayim yutom mitzitcha elef urvafami minecha elecha lo yigash rak beinecha tabit v'shulamat rishayim tireh ki ata Adonai machsi elyon samtem onecha lo tuneh lecha ra'a v'nega lo yikra bo halecha.
I'm gonna ask everybody if you could do me a favor. Look around and tell me what you see, and headstones is not the answer. Flags. Family and friends are good too. But if you look around, you see these flags waving. One of the most honorable parts of my funeral ministry is what I'm about to do. And I'm about to say thanks to your husband, to your dad, to your grandfather, to your great-grandfather, to your brother, to your uncle, to your friend, to our community member. In a world where we forget about gratitude sometimes, this is something when we have to pause and come to that moment. This truly reminds us of gratitude. And I always point out the American flags at a cemetery because oftentimes when we go, we see a flag, it's a veteran, right? But the old adage of freedom not being free, it is so true. So I'm going to ask you all to take a deep breath like Rabbi asked before, to close your eyes and to say a prayer for all those men and women and their families around the world serving, that we can stand here and be present in freedom and in peace. I'll give you all a moment to get your tissues. That's always a hard but beautiful thing, and we thank Irwin for his service, as well as the men and women of all the United States Armed Services. I would be remiss, and he gets mad at me every time he comes because he's so humble, but that bugler you heard, his name is John, and he drives about 2 hours for me as a volunteer with Buglers Across America, because he believes, as do all the men and women of that very fine organization, that no veteran should have taps played off of a CD. So he takes his days and drives all the way down for every veteran that he can. So we thank the men and women from Buglers Across America for all that they do. In a moment, the casket is going to be lowered, and that's can be a very difficult thing to watch. So we just like to let you know that that's going to happen, and I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi, who's going to kind of explain the rest of our services. Mm-hmm. As long as you're okay. Unless you want to leave it up. No, that's fine. Keith? Got him? Rose, we gotta go to you, don't we? Kevin, you gotta pull. Rose, watch this side, please. Yep. Kevin, swing down this one. Good. I think we got it. Kevin, ready? Yeah, we're good.
You are welcome. Ad mikamom yavol shalom. Irwin Mogel, may you rest in peace. My friends, we are here to pay our last respects to the physical remains of Irwin Mogel. Pardon me. Irwin passed away this past Thursday at his daughter's home. He was 93 years old. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for embracing and a time for shunning embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for letting go, a time for silence and a time for speech, a time for war and a time for peace. My friends, traditionally a Jewish funeral is not a long ritual affair. There are a couple of psalms and a few prayers. Most of the sharing happens during Shiva, the days immediately following the burial. We have two really important obligations today. One is to place our loved one in the earth from which we all came. And the second is to share our memories, to do eulogies. Irwin Mogel was a loving husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. He's survived by his wife, Roberta, and his children, Jody Kaplowitz and her husband, David, Wayne Mogel and his wife, Angel, and Karen Shankoff and her husband, Michael. He is survived by his grandchildren, Danielle Kaplowitz-Millette and her husband, Ramsey, Brian Kaplowitz and his wife, Desiree, Jamie Belazarian and her husband, Greg, Alyssa Bushinger and her husband, Brett, Jordan Kaplowitz and his wife, Stephanie, Jarrett Mogel, Matthew Shankoff and his wife, Jessica, Jenna Bednors and her husband, Bryce. Irwin is also survived by great-grandchildren. And that's a real blessing. How many of us will get to see the third generation? Brianna, Zachary, Mark, Jonah, Mason, Zoe, Maisie, Ayla, Charlie, Henry, Sonny, Millie, Nola, Gabriel, Mav, and Jack. And finally, Irwin Mogel is survived by everyone here, all of those whose lives he touched, all of us who are gathered here in person and online, who have come together to honor his life. Irwin was born and raised in Brooklyn in tough circumstances. From an early age, he was a caretaker for his mother who had serious health issues. Irwin met his wife-to-be, Roberta Swiss, when they were young. They were just teenagers. But over the next few years, Irwin fell in love with Roberta, and ultimately they were married. 73 years. Yeah. Irwin remained completely devoted to Roberta for the rest of his life. They raised 3 children. Irwin, according to his loving children, was not always the most patient of parents. But there was nothing he would not do for his family. He loved his wife and children, and they felt his love. Irwin was a hairstylist for 60 years, totally committed to his craft. His customers loved him. Indeed, he mastered his craft to such an extent he became a hairstylist to the stars. His clients included Joe DiMaggio, Golda Meir, and Dan Rather, among other famous people. Irwin had a very strong work ethic, something he bequeathed to his children. He woke up regularly at 5 a.m. in Rockland County to make it into the city to get the day started. Irwin had a great sense of humor. He could make those around him laugh. He loved gardening and working in his yard. He was very much the handyman around the house. He loved following politics, and Irwin loved following the stock market. Toward the end, when Irwin's health started to deteriorate, he seemed to cling to life. He really didn't want to die. Now look, all of us are afraid of death. In Irwin's case, though, as I look out, and everyone, please just look out. Look at all these people whom he knew, whose lives he touched. Look at everyone who's come today. Who would want to leave that? Who would not want to cling to that life? There are rabbis in our tradition who maintain that the soul of the departed is close to the body during the first 7 days or so, especially during the funeral. So you should imagine that Irwin is watching us, each and every one of you. He is also looking out, and he is seeing everyone who showed up for him. I can see why he wouldn't want to leave this. But I hope what he sees here today gives him a sense of satisfaction, of assurance that he lived a good, rich life. Irwin, as you proceed on your journey to eternity, your love here on earth will never die. Irwin, who could never stop doing, who is always on the go, may you rest in peace. A psalm. God is my shepherd, I lack nothing. God makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me to water in places of rest, renewing my life, guiding me in the right paths, as befits God's name. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table before me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Only goodness and love shall pursue me all the days of my life. I shall dwell in God's house for many long years. Folks, I'll ask you to take a deep breath. It is at this point in the service that I invite people up to give their eulogies, to share their memories. Is there an order?
Does we want to bring the microphone to mine?
Yes. Do you want to start or do you want to?
Yeah.
What's a little high if you could?
Yeah, let me just want everybody to hear you. Come up a little closer. Perfect.
This is written by my aunt for her husband. Thank you all for being here today to support me and our family at this time of loss. My beloved husband of almost 73 years has now departed and left a hole in my heart. It's hard to recall a time when he wasn't a part of my life. being that I was only 14 when we had our first date. Prior to that, I remember when I and two of my girlfriends would go down to the luncheonette to oogle the good-looking guy who worked there. Turns out it was Irwin. One day, as my friends and I were leaving the luncheonette, he said to my friend Judy, "Stop in later." Judy was unsure, but decided to go back to see what he wanted, and he asked her out. She turned him down and said, and he said, "What about your other friend?" She said, "Which one? There are two." He said, "The one in the brown dress with the bangs." Judy came out and told me that he wanted to see me. I strutted into the luncheonette and said, "My friend told me you wanted to see me." He said, "Yes, what are you doing Saturday night?" I said, "Nothing really." And he said, "I'd like to take you out." I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I don't play second fiddle." And I walked out. Time passed and he tried again, and this time I was more receptive. At the end of the date, he walked me up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment. Shyly, he said, "This is the hardest part," and gave me a quick peck on the cheek and flew down the stairs and out the building. The next day, he called me and asked me to come down because he wanted to talk to me. When I came down, he said, "I know what I want when I see it. And I want you. And I don't want you to see anyone else." My response was, "I'm only 14. And I cannot make a decision right now." He started to date me more regularly while I still went out on other dates, and eventually we became a couple. From then on, we were never apart, and we married in 1951 when Irwin was 20 and I was 18. When we got home from our honeymoon, his draft papers were waiting for him to go into the Army. Since we were newly married, we were granted an extension, and he was able to stay for another 10 weeks. He served for 2 years, and when he returned, we started our life together. We built a beautiful family. 3 children blessed our lives. We spent our 20s and 30s nurturing our brood. Irwin worked very hard as a hairdresser, traveling into the city very early each morning, 5 days a week. And as you've heard from my children, the running theme is that he had an incredible work ethic and provided a comfortable life for us. In our 40s, our children were almost grown and starting to begin their own lives. The 50s brought a big move to Marlborough, to Greenbrier, and 55 and over community. We spent our 60s, our 70s and 80s, and the beginning of our 90s there. And they were almost 38 of the happiest we spent in any place, making good friends and enjoying all the amenities that went along with the community living. While I was out playing mahjong, doing shows, or attending many committee meetings, Irwin was once again busy with his lawn, making rock gardens and landscaping the property. And once a week, he did go out to lunch with the guys. Because he worked up until he was 80, I worried about him traveling on the bus, getting on and off with his bad feet and neuropathy, and I would be nervous until he walked into the house. Some evenings I would wait at the bus stop to pick him up, and I would let out a sigh of relief that he made it home safe and sound. Irwin cared for me like no other. Every night he would turn to me and say, "I love you, and I'm glad I married you." I would say, "I know, honey, I love you too." And now my best friend, since I was 14 years old, has gone. I choose to believe that he is not gone, but on his next journey. One day we will be together, and the good-looking soda jerk from the luncheonette will smile his handsome smile and melt my heart all over again. Until then, rest easy, my sweetheart. I will never forget all the good times, and I love you from here to the end of the world and back and 12.
Thank you all for coming. There's going to be a lot of repeats, but here we go. My father was born on March 29th, 1931, and his life started out rocky. He was the middle child between two sisters, born into the Depression years, and deprived of the kind of childhood where he could enjoy the rituals and demands of just being a kid. The family was very poor, as were many at this time. But according to my dad, his family had very little. Not a lot of food or clothing, and everyday necessities. At a very young age, he took on the role of caretaker for his mom, who had health problems, administering her medications and injections. At the age of 48, when my dad was 19, my grandmother Jenny died. After all the trials and tribulations of growing up, losing a parent at 19 was difficult. The bright spot for my dad was that he had met my mother when he was 16 and she was 14. They had the same birthday, only 2 years apart, and they married when Mom was 18 and Dad was 20. I was born when Dad was 23 and Mom 21. Wayne came almost 3 years later, and Karen 4 years after that. My father worked hard to make a living because working hard was the only thing he knew how to do. He was a hairdresser for 60 years, professionally known as Mr. Paul, and traveled into New York City on the bus until he was 80 years old. He never took a taxi to his work after arriving at the Port Authority, but rather walked the 10 to 15 blocks to the shop. I'm not sure if it was because he loved walking or because of his Depression-era mentality, he didn't want to spend the money on a cab. Probably the latter. Mr. Paul enjoyed his work as a hairdresser and really cared about all his customers. He always liked to tell people about the famous celebrities or dignitaries whose hair were touched by his scissors. On the many occasions I would go up to his shop, I would marvel at the guy who seemed to float around, making sure everything and everyone was cared for. He smiled and laughed a lot in that space, and I remember I'd always say to my mom, "There's a different guy at work than the one that comes home."
So true.
I guess in certain ways, the stresses and demands of parenting and running a home were a remembered feeling back to his childhood, and so perhaps his patience was less. Though my dad made a decent living, life was never lavish, but we always had love, good food, and a lovely home, groomed on the inside and out by my dad, and kept impeccably on the inside by my mom. Of course, Harriet Housewife, the name we coined for him, took care of things on the inside too. From dusting, vacuuming, wiping the counters, cleaning the kitchen table with ammonia before any of us were done eating, making beds, and periodically shrinking mine and Karen's clothes because he couldn't stand the fact that they were sitting dirty in the hamper. From Brooklyn to Spring Valley and then to Marlboro, my parents' home was always warm, comfortable, and inviting, as evidenced by the many relatives who would show up at our house in Spring Valley unannounced for a day visit or sometimes longer. There were always lively political discussions around the dining room table where my dad would get to yell and bluster with my Uncle Mac, as well as others. He was a boisterous, loud, opinionated, but always loving man. My dad's style of parenting was strict. His famous line was, "Don't ever try to put anything over on me because I'll always find out." Sorry, Dad, you didn't always find out. I believe he felt that the measure of a man was to be strong and gruff. We kids were kind of afraid of him, and he did lose his patience and his temper from time to time. Wayne, of course, tested his patience the most. And I'll never forget the time when Wayne, again, had done something wrong and ran out of the house to escape punishment. And Dad, in his underwear, chased him all the way down our street to bring him back. Ah, those were the days. In later years, Dad softened up a lot. Though that rough exterior was a part of who he was, we three always knew we were loved, which I believe for a child is the most important thing. There wasn't anything that Dad wouldn't do for his family, and he did many wonderful things for all of us over the years, oftentimes sacrificing his own needs. Nothing was more important than his wife and kids, and he conveyed that to us over and over again. So here we are today, saying goodbye to a guy who from lemons made huge quarts of lemonade. And though there were hard times along the way, my dad really did have a wonderful life. In the years that ensued, he watched all 3 of his children get married. He welcomed 8 grandchildren and 16 great-grandchildren, with 2 in just the last few months. This year, Mom and Dad would have celebrated their 73rd anniversary, and they've been together for over 77 years. Really quite a testament to a man whose start in life was less than stellar. We will always remember the good times, and we all know that without you, Dad, Poppy, none of us would be here. Miss me, but let me go. When I come to the end of the road and the sun has set for me, I want no rights in a gloom-filled room. Why cry for a soul set free? Miss me a little, but not too long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember the love that we once shared. Miss me, but let me go. For this is a journey that we all must take, and each one must go alone. It's all part of the master plan, a step on the road to home. When you are lonely and sick at heart, go to the friends we know, and bury your sorrow in doing good deeds. Miss me, but let me go. May you rest in peace, and may your memory be a blessing for all who knew you and loved you for always, from here to the end of the world and back, and 12.
If I repeat the same story, stop me.
Stop.
You know, it's funny. My sisters and I did not write this together. We each wrote our own eulogy, correct? And we all have the same story. Friends and family, thank you so much for being here with us to celebrate the life of my father and grieve along with us. I'm so sad that I will never get to see his face again on this side of heaven. But right now, I ask that we take a collective breath together and celebrate the incredible man that my dad was. My dad was a very complicated guy. From a very young age, he was on his own, taking care of his sisters and his very sick mom. My dad grew up poor. He lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn with his mother, his father, and slept in the same bed with his 2 sisters. My dad persevered, though, through it all. He raised a beautiful family, and we never wanted for anything. We had a beautiful home and always had a good meal on the table. I remember as a young child my dad getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to catch a 5:30 bus from Spring Valley, New York to New York City to open up his salon and not return home until after dark. He did this 5 days a week, exhausted, but he never complained. When he wasn't working, he was home working on his house or the lawn. He always took pride in everything he did. Dads are someone to look up to, someone to follow, someone to admire, someone to be proud of, and someone to brag about. Someone to hold and someone to cry with, someone to learn from and someone to respect, and most of all, someone to share everything this world has to offer. And I thank him for that, because this is where my work ethic came from, which was such a valuable lesson to learn and served me well in my life. My dad was hysterical, always joking and always making people laugh. He ruled with an iron fist, and I feared him, but most of all, I respected him. I'm so incredibly grateful and happy that I can stand here today and tell you that I have had all of this and much, much more with my dad. I'm blessed to have had him for the 67 years of my life. I will always love you, Dad, from here to the end of the world and back. And 12. Rest in peace.
Okay. Okay, we are going to repeat some of the same things, but one thing that hasn't been said is I debated whether to put makeup on today because I knew I'd be doing a lot of crying. But I knew this man would want it because there wasn't a time that we would walk into the house and if looking pale or not just looking just right, my father would say, put a little lipstick on. You need a little blush. So, Dad, I didn't put a lot on, but I put it on for you. Hello, everyone. I'm Karen, his third child, the Oops. I'd like to thank you all for traveling and taking the time to celebrate the life of my dad, Irwin Mogel, a.k.a. Mr. Paul. That was the name given to my dad at his first job as a hairdresser at Macy's. His boss did not feel that calling him Irwin over the loudspeaker when an appointment was waiting for him sounded professional, and they had just lost a stylist named Mr. Paul, so they changed his name to Paul, and it stuck ever since. My dad let everybody know when he met them that he was the hairdresser of the stars. Although he did have clients with popular status, I don't know if hairdresser of the stars is exactly what I would have called him, but we let him have it. He also needed to let everybody know that Joan Rivers was his cousin. My dad thought he was as funny as Joan Rivers. I don't know about that, but, he tried. He also needed to let everybody... okay. My dad was given several names throughout the years that we used accordingly. Tom Dugan, Irvina the Cleaner, Harriet Housewife, Pia, pain in the ass, and Catman for his endless rebounds from his many hospital visits. My dad was an interesting guy. He wasn't your regular guy that had many hobbies like watching sports, playing golf, or fine dining and good wine. He loved his home and making sure that everything in it was kept impeccable and perfect. He was a handy guy that loved to take care of the lawn, fix anything that needed a repair. My husband can be a witness to this, or clean a stain off the ceiling at 2 o'clock in the morning as soon as he got home from his vacation. If you ever experienced a meal at our house, you might have been surprised to see a spray bottle filled with ammonia and Dad spraying the kitchen table while you were still eating. As long as he was done, didn't matter what anybody else was doing. He always managed to get friendly with my former boyfriends, where instead of hanging out with me, they were mowing our lawn, digging tree stumps out of the yard. Is that the truth? He loved the stock market and heated political debates at every holiday dinner. Hence the reason I hate politics so much and experience PTSD from it all. My dad had a difficult childhood, as you all know, or shall I say he really didn't have a childhood. Grew up with a very sick mother that he took care of most of his younger years, and his priorities were always to be a caretaker, and that carried him through his adulthood. He was very poor and lived in a one-bedroom walk-up apartment where he shared a bed with his sisters. Boy, we really got this down. As poor as he was, Dad had one suit and still managed to win Best Dressed in his high school yearbook. He met Mom when she was 16. When he was 16, she was 14. They were married. You know all that. And he always loved and protected her throughout their 72 and a half years of marriage. He wanted her by his side at all times and never, ever forgot to tell her each and every day how much he loved her. They even shared the same birthday. My dad was one of the hardest workers I knew. Got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, traveled into New York until his 80s, stand on his feet as a hairdresser. Even with neuropathy in his feet and difficult walking, he never missed a day of work. His clients absolutely loved and adored him, and that is the truth. For those of you who know my father, everybody was always entitled to his opinion. He claimed he may never always be right, but he is never wrong. And if asked how he was feeling, the answer was always terrible. Which is the truth. Wait, I gotta find it. Okay. If you don't know this by now, his 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 16 great-grandchildren would not have been here without him, and he let us know that every time we got together. My dad and I had a very, very close relationship. We were really tight as thieves. I worried about him since I was a young girl. I think he guilted me into this because every time he asked, I was the youngest, I was alone in the house, and every night he wanted me to peel him a carrot, cut him a pepper, give him a turnip. He loved to eat at night, and I remember always yelling at him saying, "I'm not your slave. Why do I have to do it?" as I was marching down the steps to peel him the carrot, cut the pepper, bring him the turnip. Because I was always afraid if anything happened to him, I would never forgive myself. Every time, I did these things because he did everything with such force and gusto that sometimes when he had his heated temper, I was so afraid he would have a heart attack and die, and I would, never forgive myself. Every time, and this is really the truth, every time he reached a milestone birthday, I asked God, please give him 10 more years. He answered my prayers and kept him alive until the age of 93. My dad was so proud of his family. I am so blessed to have had him for so long, although he went through some difficult health struggles throughout the years. Mike and I made a decision to bring my parents to our home where they could live out the rest of their lives. What a guy. What a guy. When my dad first came to live with us, this was like unbelievable. He was at the point where he was completely bedridden, and he called Michael into the room one day, and he always said, if he wanted to talk to you, "Mike, can I talk to you?" Mike said, "Of course." "Could I have your permission to get a dog? I would like a Dalmatian." Mike, who's always diplomatic and really, you always have the best answers, said, "Irwin, of course you can. If you can walk him, you can get a dog." The discussion was over then and there. My father totally marched to the beat of a different drum. He fought so hard to stay alive and did not want to die. Up until the last minute, he kept grabbing my hand, saying, "I don't want to die, stay by my side." Really fast, I'm going to veer off. The hospice nurse came in and said to me, "I just want to let you know, sometimes they just want you to leave the room so they could pass." And I sat there very politely and I said, "Okay." Then I came back into the room with my mother. I said, "She out of her freaking mind. This guy doesn't want us to leave the room so he can die. He wants us right there with him by his side and to die with us right there," which is exactly what happened. And, nobody knows your parent like you know your parent. He beat to a different drum. He fought so hard to stay alive and did not want to die and was successful at avoiding it for many years, hence the name Catman. My head is filled with so many memories of my dad rambling through my mind, too many to share with you all right now, but enough so that I will have a treasure trove of them to sustain me for a very long time. Dad, although you won't be here to ask, I will continue to tell you how much sales I did in the store each day. And I know Jody and I will always treasure the phone calls you made to us to sing, "I just called to say I love you." Rest in peace, Dad. I will treasure how proud you were of me and how much you loved me. I will never forget that. I will always love you from here to the end of the world and back, and 12.
Yes. Okay. And if you stand just as close to the mic.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you for being here to celebrate the life of my grandfather, Poppy, Irwin Mogel. Poppy was a guy who always had something to say. The man loved to talk, argue, complain at times, stir the pot, if you will. But the one thing he would always say, other than calling me princess since the day I was born, was, "I love you." You see, for a guy who was a complex character, he really was quite simple. He loved his wife and his family more than anything, and if everyone was okay, then he was okay. We know Poppy had a difficult childhood, had to grow up very fast, and sometimes that made him rough around the edges. But on the inside, you would never find a man who could express the love he had in his heart for Nanny, his 3 grandchildren, his 8 grandchildren, and his 8 grandchildren and his 16 great-grandchildren. What a blessing his life was to have lived 93 years and leave such a beautiful legacy. And don't worry, Pop, we know we wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. A few memories come to mind. When I was young, I always heard that Poppy worked in the shop. I knew that he cut hair, but I didn't realize that the shop was where he did it till much later. I thought it was like a candy shop or something. When we go visit Poppy at the shop, he'd introduce me to all his customers. Everyone called him Mr. Paul, and naturally I was confused. I still am, but Aunt Karen cleared it up. People would say, "Paul, that's your granddaughter? Her hair! It's such a gorgeous color!" And he'd reply, "You can't get that color from a bottle." One day when I was in high school, my friend Rebecca and I decided we wanted to dye a couple of chunks of our hair platinum blonde. I said, "I got a guy." "My Poppy can do it." We took the train into the city and went to Poppy's shop. We walked in and told him about the new do we wanted. He immediately put rubber caps on our heads with little holes all over them and pulled out the 2 front pieces of my hair through the holes in the cap very quickly and haphazardly. I had only seen people use foil, so I definitely thought in that moment I had made a huge mistake by asking Poppy to do this. We also looked ridiculous, but that was beside the point. Before I knew it, there was bleach on the pieces of my hair that were resting on top of the rubber cap. I thought I was going to cry. I said, "Poppy, what are you doing? Do you even know what pieces of hair you pulled out to dye? This seems like you're guessing." For a man who always had something to say, he basically just said, and shooed me away. Rebecca was nervous too, but she had to be polite. Before she could say a word, he pulled out her hair of the holes in the cap and stuck some peroxide on it as well. All we could do was wait for the final result. Finally, it was time to take off the cap and reveal his work. Shockingly, it was perfect. It was in the exact place I wanted it, right in the front 2 pieces, and really brought out my 1990s hippie bohemian theater nerd meets skater chick who didn't skate vibe. He was great at what he did and stood on his feet for years to make sure he was always able to provide for his family. He never missed an occasion when I was growing up. He was at every single event I ever had. He was at every show I was ever in. He loved to talk on the phone with me, and he always took an interest in what I was doing with my life. He loved Ramsey and my children, and we all loved him right back. It seems surreal that he's gone after being in my life for almost 43 years. To have had my grandfather all this time is incredible, and I'm so grateful for it. Poppy, I promise we will never forget you. The memories of you will be a blessing in our lives. I promise to make egg noodles with cottage cheese once in a while and eat pistachios out of the shell and think of you when I do. You rest now, Pop. You certainly deserve it. I love you. Love, Princess.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Thank you. Hiya, Sonny. How are you? Where are you? That's how all the phone calls with Poppy started. And towards the latter years of his life, many in-person conversations started that way as well. Pipes, pistachios, pretzels, potato chips, any snack starting with a P, pillow fights. Paul. These are some of the words that remind me of Poppy. Poppy, besides being a loving and devoted husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, was an incredibly spirited man who taught me the meaning of hard work and the meaning of commitment to your family and to your marriage. I never thought I'd say I was happy my wife grew up in Marlborough, but the truth is I'm very grateful that her parents lived there. As Poppy's mobility waned, we were able to see him and Nanny a lot over the last 8 years, and he got to have a relationship with my wife and my kids. Poppy didn't recognize or relate much to this world that he's left behind, always wanting for the days of years past. But I hope now, with a little perspective, he can see what a blessed life he lived. May we all live to 93, with 16 great-grandchildren and a full head of mostly black hair. As you all know, Poppy used to say, if it weren't for me, none of you would be here. Well, Pop, those words have never been more true than today. So thank you. And take it easy on everyone up there. They're all doing their best.
Mine makes no chronological sense, but...
Stand in front of both of them because that one's picking up the camera. Thank you.
All right, Poppy. We're all here today because of you. You were a character from a generation I don't think anyone has ever heard of. A real old-timer and stuck back in a time we don't know. The only man calling us pussy girls in 2024. You sure were unique, but I loved that about you. I loved watching you express your opinions, and I really loved staying silent and watching everyone else react. I know I am your favorite. We had a special bond because I always knew when to agree with you. It was always Trump. I love him, Poppy. Long hair on girls, terrible. He always used to say, Lissy, why don't you cut your hair really short? I don't know, Pop, that's a great idea. It wasn't me just appeasing you. I just knew that you were always entitled to your opinion, and so were we. And I loved your opinions. There was definitely no one quite like you, except for Cousin Brian. In the famous Army picture. It's displayed on the counter. You were the biggest family man, and you wanted us around you at all times, even if we had to be quiet. And all of us here is a true testament of how much love you gave. Your questions about how much money we made and how much things costed us, and all of your questions every day did not come from a bad place. It was because you had pure joy from knowing that your whole entire family was just happy and taken care of. I will never forget you driving me to Massachusetts every winter break. And then the tables turned when I had to pick you up in the city and take you to cut hair at the Pierre. I would ask you every time why a guy with a club foot that couldn't stand or walk was going to cut some lady's hair in the city, and then found out that Mrs. Fuller paid you about $10,000 to put those pin curls in. Yep. Fuller paid you $10K to put pin curls in. You were the only hairdresser that was still doing pin curls. I've never met a guy hold on for so long. I think I've come to say goodbye to you about 20 times. But this time it's for real, Pop. I love you from here to the edge of the world and back and 12.
Are you next? I'm next. Ramsey, what's this?
Windguard. It's
Windguard.
A wind buff.
I was wondering about this thing the whole time. I didn't write anything down, but I don't really write. So, everybody, Poppy said, if it wasn't for me, none of us would be here. But it seems that maybe if it wasn't for Judy, nobody would be here. Judy told Poppy to take a hike. So, I don't know, Pop. Maybe it's Judy. Thanks for the perms. As a father recently myself, as a man, for me anyways, you have a sense of duty, commitment. You wake up, you put one foot in front of the other no matter what. I think everybody said it, but it's a testament to not only his strength and will, but to go 93 years and have this amazing family and have this amazing legacy is just, I think we would all sign up for it right now. And it's just, it's pretty amazing. So I think he's a testament to it doesn't matter where you start, it's where you finish. Mm-hmm. Okay? And Poppy, I love you. Rest in peace. And knock it out up there, man. Do some perms. Love you.
If my Poppy was here today, I can guarantee you if I asked him how he was doing, he would say he was terrible. He didn't have the easiest upbringing, and I'm sure if you ever met him, he probably told you that. Despite his hardships, he built an incredible family that he cared for so deeply. And I don't know if this is the right venue for this statement. However, he repeatedly told me I was his favorite. And I always believed him. We bonded over the stock market, the Republican Party, shoot 'em up gangster films, cleanliness, and hot dogs and pastrami sandwiches, despite the fact that he wasn't allowed to intake salt for the last 10 years of his life. In the latter years, I couldn't wait to introduce Jess to my nanny and Poppy. We walked into a warm 87-degree house. Poppy was freezing cold, wearing nothing but underwear and a white V-neck. This would be his uniform going forward. Poppy always took a strong interest in my life and my family. After explaining what I did for work to him for the 400th time, he would ask, "Hey, Sonny, how much money do you make?" "Not a lot, Poppy. 5-10 million in a good year." "What?" And that would always be followed up with, "Do you think Brian's ever going to meet anybody?" "I don't know, Poppy. I don't know. Brian met somebody." He was the #1 fan of my wife and kids. He always asked Jess why he would turn on Fox News and she wasn't there as the main anchor. He loved us with everything he had, and we loved him right back. Poppy hadn't been doing well for a while now, and I can't tell you how many times I got the call from my mom telling me to go down to Marlborough and take a trip to see him because this would be probably be the last. 3 years ago, I got one of those calls. I was bummed. I got straight in the car and I headed to Marlborough. Hospice was there and the diagnosis wasn't good. On the way down, I called ahead to see if anyone wanted a sandwich from the Pickled Herring Deli. And to my surprise, Poppy answered the phone. "How you doing, Sonny? I'll take a beef tongue sandwich." He was a fighter. He wanted to be here to continue watching his family grow. It's hard to put into words into how much I admire my mom for the selfless love and care she's always given my Poppy, but especially these 8 past months. Mom, I can't promise you I'll build you an addition at my house, but just know we'll always be here for you. And to my nanny, you're one of the strongest women I know. To put up with that guy for 72 years, it's quite the accomplishment. We love you so much. You never want to see someone you love pass, but I truly believe my Poppy is not suffering and he's in a better place, eating all the pastrami he wants. And like he always used to say to me, enjoy life while you're young. It goes by fast. Rest in peace, Poppy. I love you.
I just want it known for the record, Nanny told me I'm her favorite. I'm going to hold them for you. You just talk from the heart.
Okay. First, I want to say thank you to everyone that put themselves out today to come and honor Irwin. I also want to tell you, first let me say that my godson, Neil, flew in from Texas to be here today because he loved Irwin. That touched my heart. And Karen's friend Stacy came from Florida.
I think they have another funeral.
Also. And I won't go on anymore to tell you what a wonderful husband he was to me and how much he loved me. I have that in my heart, and I'll have it until I'm next to him. Thank you, everyone, very, very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who shared. Those were really beautiful. Thank you. The traditional prayer for the departed is the El Malei Rachamim. I'm going to sing that. I'll recite it in English. If you are able to rise comfortably, I'll ask you to do so. El Malei Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Kachat Kanfei Ashchina B'malot Kedoshim Tohorim Kizoa Harakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Yitzchak Ben Velvel Shalach La'olamo Began Eden Tei Menuchato Lachein Bal Harachamim Yastireo v'sei teknafav lolamim v'yitzor b'tzor achim et nishmato Adonai hu nachlato v'yanuach hamishkavo b'shalom v'nomar Amen. O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, establish proper rest upon the wings of your divine presence for the holy and pure who shine like the splendor of the firmament, for the soul of Irwin Mogel, who has departed from this world. Let his rest be in the Garden of Eden. God of compassion, cover him in the protection of your wings forever, and bind his soul with the bonds of life. Let him rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. Amen. Folks, at this point in the service, you may be seated. This is perhaps the hardest part. And because it is the hardest part, we ask the immediate family to stay in the background for just this moment. This is when we place earth on our loved one's coffin. Think of it as returning to the earth from which we all came. It's kind of like going back home. I'm just going to look behind you, see what we have here. We have shovels on either side. I'll ask you to make 2 lines on either side, but I'll ask you, if at all possible, to do so without speaking. I have some prayers to read while we place the earth on the coffin. I myself will do the first shovel. I'm going to do it differently than you need to do it because we are not merely digging a hole here. It's not one of Irwin's garden projects. This is for Irwin, and we do it intentionally and slowly, and we don't do it efficiently. It's not supposed to be perfectly done. All right. Before we do that, we have earth here from the land of Israel. We sprinkle that into every grave. This connects all the Jews in the world that are buried.
Yes. So, everybody, this is extremely important. First, your safety is of our utmost concern. Here at Flemington Jewish Community Cemetery, you may notice that there is a concrete vault in the ground that is just required for cemetery purposes. However, it does conform to all Jewish rules. So, that being said, we are going to ask that when you place the shovel full of earth inside, what we're going to attempt to do for the first time, everybody goes around and there is a large group, so we're going to ask after you place your shovel full, you place the shovel back into the earth. Do not hand it from one person to the other. You're supposed to do the full mitzvah as much as you can. Please try to place the earth on top of the casket. The goal is that we want to cover the entire casket in the vault now. After that, the lid will be closed, and then we will continue. What we also do here is that given there is such a large crowd, we're going to again form 2 lines on either side. As Rabbi said, during this time, this is not a time to start to talk and kibbutz, as my New York Jewish grandma tells me. but it's a time to just be calm, quiet, and reflective. So after you've come forward, we're going to ask you to go back to where you are, as the ritual has not concluded yet. After our time has concluded here at the cemetery, if anybody wants to, after everybody goes back to their cars immediately and circles around, as a reminder, you are not allowed to go anywhere on the lawn here. Okay, you have to pull around. If anybody would like to circle back after the family has gone back for their meal, you can join them later. If you want to come back and stay and help us fill in a little bit, you're welcome to do that. There's no obligation on your part too, but some people just want to stay a little longer. We'll give you that opportunity. I'd ask you to be mindful on either side of where the tent stakes are holding it down. And what I like to do here at our funeral home is I like to ask the youngest person to come forward, who I believe is being held by Mom right now, who I finally got to meet the other night. Where's the newest baby? I know we have there we go. Because I've always felt that having the youngest one sprinkle the earth in shows the connectivity from generation to generation to generation, and we hope that all the generations continue to be inspired by Irwin's legacy. So after the earth has been placed, again, I'm going to ask you to form 2 lines on the outside, again, remaining in a state of silent prayer. Rabbi will place the first shovelfuls. After he has done, then everybody else can continue at least one time around.
Taking the carrot for a second.
There we go. Now, we're going to let Mommy help you.
The first shovel fill we do on the back of the shovel. It's not going to be very much, but it's going to make a loud noise. You should hold on. Deep breath.
Ladies and gentlemen, 2 lines on either side, please. Members of my community, try to help you. Please go nice and slow.
משפט אל מומה בין אבל צדיק וישר הוא עצור תמים בכל פעל מי אמר לו מה תפעל השליט במטה ובמעל ממית ומחיה מוריד שוב ויעל עצור תמים כבכל מעשה מי אמר לו מה תעשה האומר ועושה חסד חינם לנו תעשה ובזכות הנקד כיסא הקשיבה ועשה צדיק בכל דרכיו עצור תמים ערך אפיים ומלא רחמים חמול נא וחוץ נא על אבות ובנים כי לך אדון הסליחות ורחמים צדיק בכל דרכיו עצור תמים ערך אפיים ומלא רחמים חמול נא וחוץ נא על אבות ובנים כי לך אדון הסליחות ורחמים
לך זיכרוננו למחות, ויונענך ברחמים עלינו פיקוחות, כי לך אדון הרחמים והסליחות. אדם בן שנה יהיה, או 1000 שנים יחיה, מה יקרה לו כשלא היה יהיה, ברוך דיין האמת, ממית ומחיה.
The kid telling the story, it was really touching hearts and souls.
Hi, Mommy.
You saw the cross generation. It was you guys. Thank you. Beautiful. That was perfect.
ברוך הוא כי אמתינו, משוטט הכל בעינו, ומשלם לאדן חשבונו ודינו, והכל לשמו הודיה ייתנו. ידענו אדוני כי צדק משפטיך, תצדק בדברך, ותזכה בשופטיך, ואין להרהר אחר מידת משפטיך, צדיק אתה אדוני, וישר משפטיך. שופט צדק באמת, ברוך דיין האמת, שכל משפטיו צדק אמת. חי בידיך, צדק מלא ימינך בידיך, רחם על פליטת צאן ידיך, ותאמר למלאך ערב ידיך.
Well, after he goes. I can help you if you want to put a little on there. Have him do it? Yeah, I got you. I got you.
גדול העצה ורב העליליה, אשר עיניך פקוחות על כל דרכי בני אדם, לתת לאיש כדרכיו וכפרי מעלליו. I worry about it.
Again, if some of you folks on the far side of the tent would like to come around to here, we do have some room, so just come right on around, everybody. Come right around.
להגיד כי אשר אדוני צורי ברוב לטפו, אדוני נתן ואדוני לקח, יהי שם אדוני מבורך, והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, והרבה להשיב אפו ולא יאיר כל חמתו.
That you try to cover the lid on the inside, so please be mindful you don't see any of the nasty.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah Be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael Ba'gala u'v'zman kari v'imru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mivarach leolam lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei de kudesha brichu. Liela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran bi'alma v'imru Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.